I hope you are having a lovely holiday season. Up next, it is time to take a look at iOS Today's best moments from 2022. Stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is iOS Today, episode 634, recorded for December 27th, 2022. iOS Today's best of moments.
Listeners of this program get an ad-free version if they're members of Club Twit. $7 a month gives you ad-free versions of all of our shows, plus membership in the Club Twit Discord, a great clubhouse for Twit listeners. And finally, the Twit Plus feed, with shows like Stacy's Book Club, The Untitled Linux Show, The Giz Fizz, and more. Go to twit.tv/clubtwit, and thanks for your support.
Welcome to this very special episode of iOS Today, the show that rounds out our year. These are the best moments of iOS Today for this year, and I am excited to kick things off with a couple of stories about some changes that came to iOS. First, a perplexing change that I think a lot of us said, it's not really for us. And another change that all of us said, thank goodness they finally added this feature. Quite the polarizing feature. And yeah, exactly. There's a little there because some people just do not like this. I'm curious if you are using the bottom tab bar in Safari, Dan.
Yeah, so specifically on the iPhone side, right? We on the bottom tab, so it moves the address bar, moves down to the bottom. I am using it. I decided when the betas started that I should give it a try at least. And I think there's a lot that I've decided I really like about the bottom location bar setup, because I think it adds a lot of convenience. It is one of those things where, you know, if you're me, even though I have fairly large hands, an iPhone 13 is still pretty large, and trying to get all the way up there to the top to hit an address bar and type in and then move your thumbs back down and type in a URL has always been a little bit of a dexterous challenge for me. So moving the address bar to the bottom does seem kind of natural. Like, I know it's weird because all the browsers we're used to put the address bar at the top, and that it feels like definitely a change. But I kind of likened it to, maybe it was almost close to a decade ago, I think, when Apple switched the scrolling direction on the Macs. So like when you scroll on a trackpad, you used to scroll like in one direction, and they changed it so it's more like the iPhone. And it's the same sort of thing where it's like I had to change it, and it took me like a week to get used to it. And then I didn't really look back, but I think it took longer with me. Maybe I'm just because I'm getting older with the address bar, but I definitely hit a point where it's like now when it's at the top in an iPhone, like on somebody else's phone, I think it's weird. What about you?
Interesting.
You use the bottom one too?
Interesting. So I was going to show, here's mine right now. My bar is at the top.
You're still at the top.
Yeah. I didn't make the switch, or I didn't stick with the switch. So I wanted to show folks how they can make that adjustment if they want to. You can see that mine's at the top. Now, here's the thing is that I totally agree whenever it comes to sort of the explanation for this feature, why this feature exists, what makes, for this kind of idea. And that is that, you don't want to do all of these thumb gymnastics to try to get to what you are typing in. And so I get why they made that change. And typically I'm the kind of person who tends to be very aware of myself being bothered by change and going, am I bothered by this just because it's change, which is just a thing that all humans experience? We all have that bit of like, whenever change happens. Or am I bothered by this because it's something more? So I gave it the old college try, but it just it didn't gel for me in the betas. And unfortunately, because I made that change while I was using the beta software, now that the full featured version is out, I just have never switched back to the new version. I've not gone back to the future, as it were. We're going to cover the iOS 15.4 updates because that also ends up covering the iPadOS updates as well. And this first one is for folks who use the built-in password mechanics that iOS provides. So password saving now has an extra feature. You want to tell us about that, Rosemary?
Yes. So I actually saw this tweeted by one of the developers who actually works on this at Apple. And he said that there are now notes in the password app on iOS. So I'm just going to pop open my password manager. And I think I've hidden the example one that I created last time, which is most unfortunate. So I'll just start by creating a brand new password here so that I can show people. So I'll just put in example.com because otherwise I'm going to end up revealing some personal information, which I don't really want to do. And I'm going to have very secure user and password. But now, once I tab into done here, I should be able to add notes. And this is a small thing. It's very small, but it's actually incredibly useful. So for example, if you've got a website with a rubbish URL and it doesn't really tell you what it is, then you can add a note that this is an example for Twit, for example. And then you will be able to find it more easily later, because this is something I know a lot of people like in other solutions like LastPass, who've been sponsors of the show, 1Password, KeePass, Bitwarden, etc. Being able to add a note just allows you to add extra context. You can also use it to store things like, for example, the backup verification codes. But I would note this is not a good field for that, because you'll see here, I've tapped done. That information is still visible. My password is an easily guessed password, and that's a warning that it gives you. It doesn't give you a warning that notes are visible, but you can see right there that it is visible. So I would not use this for storing really secure data, but it is something that you can use for storing useful little bits of information. Like, for example, if you've got a username and an email address, you can write the email into the notes field, and that's pretty handy to have.
Very nice. Yeah, I love that over time, this sort of built-in password manager is getting more and more powerful. As time goes on, we get to see those updates that make it easier to just use, and more importantly for me, recommend to family members, friends, and others the built-in password manager, rather than going through the process of setting them up with a third-party password manager like I use. So thank you, Apple and the team, for continuing to improve upon that technology so that we as technologists can continue to insist that people use a password manager of some sort to keep their accounts protected. All right. This next one, I'm so excited because Rosemary Orchard is going to show us a demo of this. Folks, we've been waiting for universal control for ages. This is the technology that Apple showed off, they demoed at WWDC, that would let you use one mouse and keyboard for your Mac devices, your macOS devices, and your iOS device, well, particularly your iPadOS devices. So you could move your cursor between an iPad that was nearby and back and forth between that and your Mac, and use the keyboard as well for those devices. It is kind of mind-boggling and was such a cool thing, but throughout the whole period of time that we were testing out the betas of this, universal control was not available for most of that time. And so folks were kind of going, are they going to be able to release it? Well, now that iOS 15.4 is here and the latest version of macOS is here, universal control is here. Rosemary, take it away.
Right. Well, I'm just going to start with, I've got a Razer Basilisk mouse here, which is connected to my Mac. It's got the little the dongle that's plugged into the charging thing. And I also have a Keychron keyboard, which again is connected to my Mac. These are connected via essentially cables. So there is no funny business going on with the Bluetooth here. But what I'll do is I'll just pop up my iPad, and also, spoiler, Mikah, I did this just now in the password section. I'm just going to mouse over from the right-hand side of my screen, and I can actually see my cursor from my iMac right here on my iPad. I can scroll up and down. I can use my keyboard shortcuts like Command F to find something. Like if I search for the word pancake in the pancake recipe, I'm going to find it. And I can Command Tab to the next application and just start typing away. So I'm really pleased with this. I've been trying this out for a few days, and it's really good. It is marked in macOS as a beta feature, but it's been working really well for me. And I should note, you can also do this the other way around. So I can't actually do this, unfortunately, with the iPad Air, because the iPad Air just doesn't have anything connected to it right now. But if I was using my iPad Pro with a Magic Keyboard, then I can actually move the cursor from my iPad Pro onto my Mac to do something and then move it back to do something else, which is just amazing. And it works so well, like really, really well. I am really impressed with it. And I'm just really pleased that it's out, even if it's officially under a beta flag in the non-beta operating system. It works really, really well.
Seeing how well it works is what makes me happy that Apple took its time, that, they weren't ready to release it until they could say, hey, this works very well. And we want it to be kind of a seamless experience. It's one of those things where the complexity is so far obscured that when you talk about it, it sounds like it's such a simple thing. And so it doesn't quite sound as mind-boggling and awesome as it does when you actually use it and see it in action. When you sit down at your desk and you're able to move your cursor between those two different operating systems and be able to use them. I mean, it is really cool how well it works. It is just slick, and it opens up the possibilities for me with so much, and makes me very excited about kind of how I'll be using it for this show and for other stuff that I work on. All of it is just so fascinating. So yeah, universal control. I think I've seen so many positive reactions to this new way of doing things. And I just hats off to the team behind this, and to the team who worked on the original continuity stuff, where you've got continuity keyboard, where copying on one device and then being able to paste on an iOS device or vice versa. The ability to, if you're running, say, Safari on your iPad, for your nearby Mac to be able to launch Safari to that tab or messages or what have you, all of those different features that work together. The ability to like right click in different locations and choose import from iPhone or iPad. This is on the Mac, and then be able to import photos from those different locations. All of those features that have these devices communicating with one another are just so slick and cool. And I love them so much. So congratulations to the team behind all of that stuff. Another thing folks should be excited to hear is that it seems as if it will get a little bit less risky to try out beta software on the Apple Watch. And that is because Apple Watch firmware can now be restored from an iPhone if the iPhone is running iOS 15.4. If you've got a watch that's given you lots of trouble, and you want to be able to fix that trouble, what needs to happen in many cases, in the case that it's kind of beyond repair from just a reset, is that the firmware needs to be reinstalled, and it kind of needs to be sort of a clean slate. And up to this point, you ended up having to send in your device to Apple or going to an Apple store and having them take over. With iOS 15.4, they're trying to put that in the hands of folks where you yourself are able to upgrade or reinstall the firmware, restore the firmware to an Apple Watch. So that's handy, super handy.
Yes, that is really great. I was at WWDC a few years ago, and I was installing the beta watch software on my Apple Watch, and it was downloading, and it had just got to the point where I just clicked install, and then I saw a bunch of tweets appearing on Twitter of people going, don't install it, it's breaking Apple Watches. And it's like, okay, time to stop, like diving for the Apple Watch charger to disconnect it. Fortunately, I didn't install the update, but with this, it would be much easier to roll back if something had gone wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yes. All right. What else do we have here? I think we did mention the Face ID got an improvement to where you can use Face ID with a mask. When you update your phone, if you have not, as you're listening, when you go to update your phone and you sort of start the install of iOS 15.4, you will be prompted to do some more Face ID readings. And all that is doing is providing Face ID a little bit more information about the parts of your face that will be exposed when you are wearing a mask. That way, it has that information and can use that to help verify your identity when it goes about trying to scan your face while you're wearing a mask. Seriously, Face ID with a mask is such a lifesaver. Speaking of lifesavers, take a look at Rosemary showing how you can use a mouse with your iPad. It kind of blew my mind. This next one is very much a power user feature that I think folks are going to kind of ooh and ah for sure. And I am curious to hear how you make use of Bluetooth devices with your iPad. Yes, folks, you can use Bluetooth devices with your iPad, or I should say Bluetooth input devices with your iPad.
Yes. Bluetooth input devices, though, Bluetooth speakers work as well. But I'm sure more people are familiar with the idea of connecting a Bluetooth keyboard with their iPad because that's been around for quite a long time. Logitech used to be pretty much the only people selling iPad keyboards. I remember I had a great one for, I think it was the original iPad mini. It was a flat keyboard with a little slot in it, and you could put the iPad in there and then the slot tilted at a certain angle, but it slid on like a smart cover. The whole thing was kind of crazy, but it was great. And I miss that device. If Logitech make them again, then somebody please let me know, because I'd love that for my new iPad mini. But nowadays you can connect more than just a keyboard. You could connect, for example, a Bluetooth MIDI device to GarageBand or similar, but you can also connect a good old fashioned mouse to your iPad and go ahead and use it. So this, for context people, is a Logitech MX Master 3, which charges via USB-C, the same as the iPad, quite handy. And I just paired this to my iPad using Bluetooth. So inside of the settings, I opened up the Bluetooth options, put the mouse into pairing mode, it popped up, and then I tapped pair. And now, I have the ability to just mouse around my iPad. Anybody watching the video will notice there's a little sort of dark gray circle that is moving around as I move my mouse, and that's the cursor. But if I mouse over something, for example, if I were going into, and I'll pick drafts for this because I know this works really well, if I mouse over one of the buttons, then it changes the area behind it, and it changes the actual cursor itself, which is really handy so that you can actually, keep an eye on where your cursor is. But there's more you can do, and this is actually the inspiration for this show. Last week in the Club Twit chat room, somebody was asking, hey, universal control's cool, but how do I change the scroll direction of my mouse? Turns out there's a bunch of things that you can change related to your mouse, and if you've got a trackpad, for example, through the Magic Keyboard or Bluetooth mouse connected to your iPad, then these definitely show up in settings under General trackpad and mouse. And then you can do things like disable natural scrolling, which I'm sure for some people feels anything less than natural, and then that will change the direction of how the scroll wheel works to be more Windows-like, for example, or how it used to be before Mac implemented natural scrolling and broke everyone's brains a bit. For trackpads, there's also tap to click and two-finger secondary click. And then you can also specify what the secondary click on your device does. So if you look at a mouse, then you've got obviously the left mouse button and the right mouse button. We are in the modern world where even Mac mice have more than one button, depending on how many fingers you click. And you can specify what the second one should do. So if I am on my home screen, then nothing happens here. But if I right click on something in my dock, which is a bad example because that is behind my picture. There we go. I'll click on Safari. Then it gives you the context menu, which is the same menu that pops up when you tap and hold. And it's worth noting that there are a couple of other things that you can do with this as well. If you pop into the accessibility settings, now you might be going, wait, accessibility settings? Yeah, accessibility settings. Under pointer control, there's some things that you can do. So, for example, increase your contrast, making it darker. You could, increase the size of it. So if you want it to be pretty large, then you can do that, or shrink it back down. And you can adjust your scrolling speed. But there's more. There's more, Mikah, which I love this. I believe it's under assistive touch. Now I'm going to get this wrong. But there is the option under mouse keys. So accessibility, assistive touch, or touch, assistive touch, mouse keys. You need to turn this on, but then you can actually go ahead and you'll be able to turn on various different things with this. Or is it not mouse keys and I'm remembering things incorrectly? I've forgotten where this is, Mikah. Oh dear. I changed it just before the show. Not custom gestures. Custom gestures would allow you to do, for example, things like drawing a specific direction and then having that do a thing. So you can make that happen, which is quite similar to, say, the custom Logitech options, but there are some more options, which, here we go. Sorry, devices. Under devices, then you can customize additional buttons. Now, the Logitech MX Master, the one that I've picked for today's show, I picked because it's got about 11,000 buttons on here, including one right between the two mouse buttons below the scroll wheel, which actually adjusts the scroll information, but there's one underneath the thumb pad, there's two on the side, right next to the horizontal scroll, and all sorts. So if I press one of these buttons, then I can then customize what this does. So I can say, for example, that it should do a tap and hold or reveal the dock. So now I tap this and it shows my dock and it hides my dock. And that's just a button on my mouse opening and closing the dock for me.
That's awesome.
So it is worth checking these things out, because I know that a lot of people think, oh, accessibility settings, like I don't need accessibility settings. You can change things like the minimum font size on your device and shrink the font size a bit more if you wanted to. Though, as a warning, some apps may perform slightly weirdly or look a bit odd with that. But there's so much in Assistive Touch that you can change, which I really like.
Let's talk about webcams. We can make these better. There are ways.
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways. We can put a link to a guide in the show notes that goes through how to set everything up with one of the contenders. But there's essentially, when I did some research, there's two different apps that make using your iPhone as a web camera much easier. And one of them is Camo and the other one is Epoch Cam. And depending on your setup and how you like to do things and so on and so forth, the different app might be better for you. But essentially, it allows you to take the great camera on the back of your device, even on an older iPhone, and use it as a web camera, which is especially handy if you've got an old iPhone hanging around and you're like, okay, like the whole pandemic thing happened. There was the working from home. Nobody had webcams, or that nostril cam that's in the hinge of my laptop was fine. Like I can live with it. And now you're like, okay, well, I'm actually permanently working from home and I want to buy a web camera, and we've got Chipageddon. There are no chips, which means that all the webcams are hundreds of dollars, but I've got this old iPhone 6S here. I could use that. Or, well, my sister's just getting rid of her iPhone 7 and getting a new upgrade. Maybe I can take that off of her hands for a very low price. And instead you can, use that as your web camera. And there's a couple of things that you can do with this as well, which makes it even easier to use longer term, though it does require a bit more setup. And there is an excellent guide from Simon Stovering, who's the creator of a couple of really niche little lovely iOS apps like DataJar, JSON, and so on, which allows you to just use the iPhone permanently as your web camera without having to open the app or anything, because it just gets permanently locked into that one application and that's all it does anymore. And that's using Apple's tools to lock that down, just like you would lock an iPhone or an iPad down for school use or whatever. So that's really handy. But you can use your iPhone as a great web camera, so you don't have to go out and buy whatever, the latest and greatest is. I'm using a Logitech Brio, but by the time this signal gets across the internet, it's not 4K anymore. But, you can save some money, and why not reuse an old device? After all, the 3 R's are reduce, reuse, and then recycle.
I am actually today coming to you from an iPhone using Camo Studio. I stopped using it because on my Intel Mac, it would spin up those fans, and they would be picked up by the microphone. And also, I just didn't like the MacBook Pro running that hard just to have the webcam. Whoops, I just shook my whole screen. But now that I'm on the Mac Studio, it works very well. And the bonus point is that I get to use Camo, and I can do fun things like, let me find it, where, suddenly we are much closer, because you can switch between the different cameras that are built into the iPhone. And so there's wide, ultra wide, and telephoto. But then you can also do fun things like adding a portrait mode, for example, which gives a nice blur behind you. But then things like having face follow, where you can move all over the screen and it moves along with you. For folks who are listening, it's just this very kind of abrupt.
Mike is trying to make his own motion sick. That's
feature.
what's really happening here. Yeah, it's like having a studio display without having to pay Apple for the studio display or having to find an S space for an extra display. Have you got a cat on your head, Micah?
Now there's a cat on my head.
Micah has an AI cat on his head. Okay, this is officially the end of the universe.
The Reminders app is Apple's built-in to-do list management application. And I want to walk you through some kind of the basic features that exist with Reminders before we dig into some of the other things that are available that can give you many of the same controls and some that you do not get in Reminders. But this is Reminders on the iPad. It looks a lot similar on the iPhone as well. And you'll notice that the modern Reminders app has a bunch of different options available for categorizing your reminders. Over on the side, you'll see today, you'll see scheduled, you'll see all, and you'll see flagged. And then you also have lists. And these lists can be ones that are automatically generated by iOS or ones that you add later. There's an edit button that lets you add or remove different lists. You can add groups so that you can sort of group your reminders based on different, be it tags, be it categories, that kind of thing. And of course, you can always reorganize these lists as you want to. In fact, there's one option that I have that's currently deselected called Assigned to Me that I'll talk about. But I do want to get through the different options here. So in my lists, you'll see options for family, for to-do, for reminders, and for groceries, with my favorite button in all of iOS, the little information button. That is an eye with a circle around it. I'll tap on to-do, and you can see now that I can make an adjustment to this list. So instead of being two exclamation points, I could change this icon to be any number of things if I wanted to. So then I could say, maybe if I created a list that was for my kids' sports ball practice, then I could use a basketball or a football in that place instead. Oh, good. I was going to say, I don't know if I'm ever going to find those exclamation points again, but they're there on the list. And then you'll see down at the bottom, there's an option to convert this to a smart list. As Apple says, use smart lists to automatically organize reminders by tags, due dates, and more. So basically, a smart list is a lot like a smart playlist in Apple Music, which is a feature that lets you just automatically kind of organize different songs based on, or different media based on a category that you select. So let's hop out of the editing option there on the left, and let's show you how to make a reminder. It's a very simple thing to do. Down at the bottom of Reminders is the button that says New Reminder, and you can keep it simple. It's as simple as let's have one that says feed the cat. And it's actually suggesting there for folks who are listening on the keyboard, a place to categorize this, a place to store this. It says, hey, you probably want to put this in your to-do list. So I can tap on suggested list and it automatically gets added to the to-do list. Now, you'll see on the left of the keyboard, there are some options, including a calendar with a little clock next to it. And there's also a location icon. Talk about that in a moment. On the right, you'll see there is a hashtag or a pound sign or an octothorpe. Those are all the different names, and a flag and a photo icon. I can actually add photos to my reminder if I want to. I can flag this if it's a particular importance, or with the octothorpe, I can give it different tags that help categorize it. I'm going to go ahead and tap on the left side where the calendar icon is and choose. And you'll see some easy shortcuts here for, I want this to happen today. I want this to be tomorrow. I want this to be this weekend or at a date and time. There's also the location icon, which it's kind of cool how you can use reminders. What I tend to use it for is I will talk to Siri and say, remind me when I get home to do blank, or remind me when I get to work to do blank, or remind me when I leave work to do blank, or remind me when I get to the store to do blank, or remind me when I get in the car or out of the car. Those are also options if you have either a Bluetooth connected radio in your car or you have CarPlay. Either of those features will let you use that functionality. So I'm going to go ahead and tap on the little eye icon. It's my favorite, next to feed the cat. And now I've got all of these options. I can add some notes. Your cat's favorite food is salmon kibble. And then I could add a URL if I needed to. So maybe this is, instead of feed the cat, it's buy the cat's food. And then I could put the URL to the food there. The date is set to today. I want to do it at a specific time. I feed the cat at 2 p.m. if I had a cat. And then I can choose some different repeat options. So what I love is that over time, Apple has added a lot of functionality to reminders in this as well. You can repeat it hourly. You can repeat it daily. You can repeat it on weekdays. You can repeat it on weekends, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, every 3 months, every 6 months, every year, or you can set it to custom. Obviously, I want this to be a daily reminder, and I can choose, of course, when to end this repeat. Tags would include hashtag pets. And I'll tap return to add that hashtag, and food, I guess we'll go with, or grocery. Then you can see that there's the option to go ahead and toggle on location. This would give me, again, the ability to say, hey, when I'm going home, when I'm going to work, when I'm getting in the car, when I'm getting out of the car, or custom, where you can make choices based on where you might be going. So if you did want to make sure that when you got to the grocery store, you got that notification, you could set up a custom reminder that says, hey, this is what I want you to be paying attention to. This is when I want you to get it. And then this really handy feature, when messaging. This is a special feature that I think a lot of people really dig. And what this allows you to do is set a reminder so that the next time you're talking to a person, you remember to talk to them about blank. So if you were talking to your pal Rosemary Orchard and you wanted to make sure that, because we're in 2 different time zones, that the next time you talk to her, you asked her a question about regular expressions, you could set up a reminder that says, when messaging Rosemary Orchard, do this reminder, at which point it would pop up and I go, oh, right, I'm supposed to ask her what this icon means if I am trying to set up a regex. And then there's the option again to flag it. You can set priorities as well. Flags and priorities are both available. Priority is a little bit more detailed version of flagging, where flagging is just like, does it have a flag or does it not have a flag? The choice of where you want the list. And then, of course, last would be add image, where I would take a photo of the cat that is just completely imaginary in this scenario and add it there, or maybe even the cat's food. And then last but not least are subtasks, which let you create tasks that exist as part of a larger task. So instead of feed the cat, maybe you have one called care for cat. And it's because you're taking care of a friend's cat. It's not your cat. So obviously, you know all of the things that you do to take care of your cat, but you're caring for a friend's cat who has a peanut allergy and currently has a rash and also only eats salmon in the morning and eats chocolate pudding at night. And so you have to make sure that each of those are listed as part of the subtasks. So I would call it care for cat instead. So we'll change that to care for cat. And then I could go in after I hit return and go down to the subtasks and do a reminder that says feed the cat salmon, and then pet the cat. Pet the cat, and then feed the cat chocolate pudding, which I do not recommend. I am A, not a cat owner, B, not a veterinarian, and C, don't play either of those on TV. And then I'll go ahead and tap done. And now I've got my Care for Cat reminder. And check this out. In Today and in Scheduled, which are these smart lists that are set up based on the fact that this is a reminder that's going to take place today. This is a reminder that is scheduled, and also those are the two that show this as one option. But check out the all option. That is because each of those subtasks also counts as a task. So those all end up getting added as well. And what shows up? Mikah's favorite icon. It's the little info button. If I tap on that, you can see that Feed the Cat Salmon can also have all of the information added to it, save for subtasks, because it is itself a subtask. So I think Reminders is an incredibly powerful application. Oh, and I should also tell you, I love this as a person who sometimes does need to have a physical representation of a thing. The new option to be able to print your reminders is really handy, so that you can make sure, if you would like to have it done that way, that you can print out these options and be able to make sure you complete all of your tasks. I think I covered everything with reminders as a quick kind of introduction. But Rosemary, I'm curious if you have anything else you'd like to add to that before we move on to some options that you're going to tell us about.
Well, I would just like to say that Reminders is really good because it's on everybody's device. If you set up a family account, then it automatically creates a family shared list, just like it does a calendar, so that you can share reminders with each other. So I have shared reminders lists with my parents. So my dad adds various tech support questions to it that he's going to have, and he thinks that I'll have to solve them when I go over and visit. And most of them, to be honest, I can solve remotely. I still go over and visit because that's, I suspect, what they really want. But I solve tech support much faster that way. But it's also got great shortcut support, and other applications have access to this, meaning it's a great gateway to get your reminders from your voice into specific applications. So for example, Due, Mikah, I know that's one of your favorite apps, can import from Reminders. OmniFocus can import from Reminders. And this means that you can add things very easily with your voice to whichever list. You don't have to change how you do that, and then it can just get sucked up. And because Shortcuts has got such good support for it as well, with adding things to it and retrieving things and so on, it makes it very easy to create it as an incredibly powerful system if you need to, or maybe just leave it as a simple list.
Any chance I get the opportunity to talk about the Reminders app and kind of how powerful it is an opportunity I take, because I think people don't realize just how broad the scope is of the Reminders app, how much it's improved, how much has been added over time. So it's always exciting to dig in and say, check out what you can do with this thing. It's kind of ridiculous. Now, this next bit is really exciting because, round about halfway through the year, we had a redesign of the artwork on the network, and it was very exciting to announce the look and feel of the new iOS Today artwork. The first thing I want to mention is, depending on if you are listening or watching, you may notice some new stuff going on. We have, there it popped up. Oh, always the wrong arm. There in the bottom left-hand corner, if you're looking directly ahead, the new iOS Today artwork is here. And if you were watching, then you saw that the intro was still our intro from yesteryear. At some point, we will update that as well, but we do have new artwork. We'd love to hear what you think. I went through multiple design cycles. We had to figure out what worked, and I was very happy to hear that Rosemary enjoyed it as well. It's got some clever, very sort of iOS reminiscent looks and feels to it, and a nice little toggle bar for the eye, which I thought was a very clever design that the graphic designer came out with. So very excited about this. And this, of course, is the artwork for our show, where we talk all things iOS, tvOS, HomePodOS, watchOS. It's all the OSs that Apple has on offer. And I am one of your hosts in talking about all of this stuff, Mikah Sargent.
And I am Rosemary, loving the purple on the new artwork Orchard, because Mikah, clearly you've been, working hard with the folks at Twit to get us that awesome purple. I really love it. I know green would have been great too, your favorite color, but you've got a great jumper, so.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy. I love this is a brand new sweater and wearing it here today on iOS today. But yes, I knew that the purple was a good color to choose because it represented, in this case, Rosemary. And I like the design here where we've got this kind of layered effect and a little bit of the blurring. And now, we didn't know this at the time, but iPadOS has come out with new features that allow for tiled windowing and layered windowing. And so it all just feels like it speaks to the years to come for iOS today. So very happy with how it turned out. You can gaze upon it just as you would like. But we have got to get into the show because we've got a lot to cover, because every year at the WWDC, that is Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference, Apple announces the first nominees for and then the recipients of the Apple Design Awards. These are awards for app and game design that honor excellence in innovation, ingenuity, and technical achievement. And Apple has a bunch of different categories for these awards to honor apps and games that fall into these particular areas. And there's an app and a game for each area. So I'm going to read through the list of the categories first, and then we're going to get into the show itself, or rather the apps themselves. There's a category for inclusivity. It says winners in this category provide a great experience for all by supporting people from a diversity of backgrounds, abilities, and languages. There's delight and fun. In this category, it's memorable, engaging, and satisfying experiences that are enhanced by Apple technologies. That's important because Apple, these may not be the most popular apps in the App Store. It's not the ones that get the most downloads in many cases. These are the apps that are taking advantage of the tools that Apple provides to make apps that Apple finds delightful. Interaction is intuitive interfaces and effortless controls that are perfectly tailored for the platform. So be that iOS or iPadOS. Social impact winners. These ones improve lives in a meaningful way and shine a light on crucial issues. Visuals and graphics winners. These are ones that feature stunning imagery, skillfully drawn interfaces, and high quality animations that lend to a distinctive and cohesive theme. And then last but not least is innovation winners. And these ones are apps that provide a state-of-the-art experience through novel use of Apple technologies that set them apart in their genre. So lots of categories to cover, and we kick things off with the inclusivity winners. And the first app we're going to talk about today is Procreate. So with Procreate, the reason that it got an inclusivity award is because, and I'll read this, it says, with new accessibility features such as tremor and motion filtering, an in-app assistive touch menu, audio feedback, and color blindness settings to augment its support of voiceover, dynamic type, and more, the app empowers more artists to create, interact, and express themselves. Procreate is a very powerful app for artists who want to use their iPad as a drawing tablet. This app actually has lots of stuff involved, and one of the new features in the latest version of Procreate is actually 3D support. So let's pop into these rollerblades here, and you can see there's a little option that says tap to select mesh, and then use the icon on the left side of the screen. It's a little rounded rectangle, plus tap to select a set. So I will select, and you can see it's choosing a mesh, and if I'm taking now my finger and moving it. Wow, my sweater and the circle match almost perfectly. Anyway, if I take my finger and move it around, I can see the 3D model of this this roller skate. And, I can get super close in and see the wooden texture. I'll pop into the layers here. We'll see the eyelets that are on the front. Oops, I'm going inside the shoe. We're getting very close. Let me zoom out a little bit more. There we go. Now I can hide those eyelets if I want to, or re-show them, take off the wheels or add them back, and then make adjustments to these layers. And you'll see that each of these has support for 3D modeling terms like color, roughness, and metallic. So I will pop out of that just to kind of kick back to the main screen. But this isn't just a 3D modeling tool. That's a very new feature. First and foremost, as I said, it is a sketch tool. So lots of different brushes. All of these, look at this. We've got sketching, inking, drawing, calligraphy, painting. So I could choose a wet acrylic, and I will change the color to something that will show up quite well on this. In fact, just a plain white would be good for this. And then I can start to sort of paint. And of course it has pressure sensitivity. So as I'm drawing with my Apple Pencil lightly, the brush is light, but as I press harder and harder, you can see that the brush gets bigger because it's also considering the physics of the brush. If you took a brush and you lightly paint with it, not only is it going to be a light stroke, but as you press it, more of the brush's surface is going to touch the paper, of course, thereby making that bigger. So really cool features that are built in for doing some true work of painting and layering and color inside of this app. But the big features, the reason why this received an Apple Design Award is because Procreate has always been known, or has for a long time been known as an app that is accessible. And they've taken things even further now with these new tremor and motion filtering features, as well as an assistive touch menu that's built in, and even going as far as adding some color blindness settings to bring this forward and make sure that it is able to be used by folks who need to have access to that. So I think I can pop into advanced settings and see some of the different features that are here. And there we go. Single touch gestures, companion, color description, notifications, feedback sounds, and tap assistance. All of those can help to make sure that they are working as you need it to. So that is Procreate. If you have Matthew Cassinelli on the show, you have got to talk about shortcuts. And part of shortcuts, that automation feature of focus modes, was really interesting learning from Matthew how to set up some focus modes. And I have to say, I was inspired. I did set up a few more than the ones that just kind of came by default with the operating system.
I think the lock screen thing really ties this all together, because in a lot of ways, the lock screen customization and all the backgrounds and things like that, they kind of default to, it does sort of set your home screen wallpaper too. And then it's really is, there's a feature that ties, if you're on this lock screen, it's tied to this focus mode specifically. Like I was saying that it was always like that with the home screen, but now that it's the lock screen, if you literally just change your lock screen and do, like I have iOS 16 here, and switch into a different one, here, wait there, this direction. I have many of them, but like this is my work lock screen, and now it actually changes my focus mode into work mode for me, even just by changing the lock screen. So like part of focus modes is you have to think to even switch into that context sometimes. And if you just wanted to change your lock screen, it could change it for you too. But let me show a better example is, so I have a widget over in my widgets area that has different focus modes. And so I've themed my phone with all of these different modes. Like my planning mode is blue, and now my wallpaper is blue, and my lock screen, and even my like main shortcuts page for those things is blue as well. And on my watch, let's see if it actually worked. It might not have because I'm on the beta, but it should also be the blue face that I have and stuff like that. So wow, you can really like, you fully shift context. You get into that mode. It's like, all right, it's work mode. Let's do this. It's, I think maybe for somebody who's like in a more traditional job, even like meeting mode, and you want to pull open your notes in your calendar app and those things, and you don't otherwise want to like have all that ready to go. But then anytime you kind of change context at work, you could do that. Or I have like planning and then like getting stuff done mode. And those are very different mental modes that I shift between. And now my phone and all of the screens and everything shifts with me. And even like the color shifts, I see that blue and I'm like, oh yeah, I should be planning, not getting distracted with something else. And if I'm switching, I switch context fully, and then that stuff is serviced to me when I need it to. So I really love this stuff. And I think some of the like super fancy bits are, let's say you were wearing a VR headset and you needed to change context and everything in your environment changed around you to the right mode right when you needed it. I feel like I'm already there. I just need it to be in VR. And then I have all my shortcuts that I can use with my voice too and get those things done still. So I feel like it's really tied in to the future of where Apple's going as well. Plus I think it just responds to the fact that we have all this cool, amazing technology, but you like look at your home screen and just pick the app that's on there, and now I'm on Twitter. And if my home screen showed me my books and things like that, I might be more likely to read then. And so you can kind of guide yourself towards these more beneficial outcomes while also having the one that's like, I just want to relax and go on Twitter and look at TikToks. And so if I'm in that mode, it's okay. And I'm not in that mode, I'm not going to do it because it's buried otherwise. And you have that like monkey brain reflex to just pick the first thing that's on there. So absolutely. I'm a huge fan of this stuff. Like I've been customizing my home screen. I did all of this before we even got focus modes, and I just was really overwhelmed by having 16 home screens full of stuff. And then now it really shortened it down into just the focus modes allowed me to just show those screens. And then now the lock screens and all that just made it a lot smoother. And I think helped my mental shift into those modes as well. So I highly recommend it if once people get onto iOS 16, set it all up. I even still like the people and the apps and the notifications thing. I think that's less, I mean, that's still important because once you're using the focus modes, you might miss some stuff, but like the home screens and that stuff is what's more interesting to me than the notifications, and that you can kind of hone over time. And they have smart features too. That's like, if you're getting notified for a reminder constantly while you're at work, it'll notice that and say, hey, do you want to add this to your work notifications and stuff like that? So they have some affordances to help you kind of set it up over time without trying.
Okay, I was super pumped to talk about this next topic because there's so much that these operating systems can do that we just don't know they're able to do. And anytime I get the chance to go to someone and say, did you know that your phone, your iPad, your Mac can do this, and show these little gestures is always a good time. So take a look at some of these hidden gestures we talked about earlier this year. One that I find kind of complicated to do, but is a possibility, is some of the text shortcuts that you can do on an iPad. So iPad for a long time has had, and you can actually do this, I forgot, on iOS as well, has for a long time had some gestures for copying, pasting, undoing, etc. If I take my three fingers, and you'll see that I'm using, if you're watching, my index finger, my middle finger, and my thumb, and I rest them on the screen after I have selected some text, then up at the top, you will see a little menu appear that says undo, cut, copy, paste, and redo. If I pinch my fingers together, it allows me to copy the text that I just got. Now I'm going to pop open notes with my multitasking gestures that I was just talking about. And you'll see I have here a note for pasting. And that is because it is a place where I'm going to paste some text. I will now put my three fingers back on the screen and move them out to paste the text that I just copied. Now, I want to talk about a viral post that I saw on TikTok not too long ago that had people wondering what the heck was going on. Because what the person had done was, I believe it was an iPhone and an iPad that were right next to each other. And they had found a photo, say like this photo of the MacBook Air here. And it looked like they had grabbed the photo with their fingers on their iPhone. And then they took their fingers while they were still pinched and they moved them over to the iPad and then they let go as if they had kind of picked up the photo from one thing, dragged it over to the other, and then let go. And so it seemed like what they were doing was some sort of AR thing where they had virtually, or in augmented reality, grabbed the photo off of the page and then dropped it on their iPad. When in reality, what was happening is that they were using two different things that are built into iOS and iPadOS. They were using those 3-finger gestures for copy and paste, and they were using the built-in continuity keyboard. There, I wasn't able to copy the photo. And that also has to do with website things, but they were using the copy and paste gestures that are built into the iPad and iPhone, and then continuity keyboard, which is this feature where on one device and another device that are both logged in to the same iCloud account, I can copy and paste text, images, and other things using the magic of the cloud between the two. And so they took these two features that are kind of, not front of mind features and made it look as if it was this very magical thing, when in reality it was two pretty common features that existed, but just seemed like it was so much more. So that's something to keep in mind, that sometimes these features are just built in and, we don't use them, or we don't think of them in such a dramatic way as this video made it look, which added to that mystique and made it seem like they were on an iOS version of the future that we hadn't heard about. Now, with those 3-finger gestures, if I rest my 3 fingers on the screen, I can move them to the left to undo and move them to the right to redo. So at any time you can do undo gestures that same way. I find this gesture of pinching to copy and unpinching to paste not intuitive and not very easy to do. For me, it doesn't feel right and I don't get it right. And so sometimes that doesn't copy and paste. So not a fan of it personally. But I want to make sure that you know that those gestures are available if that is something that you're able to do easily with your fingers. But for some reason, for me, my fingers are all different, lengths. And so putting them exactly how I need them onto the screen and moving them apart, I'm not very dexterous in that way. And so it becomes a complicated thing where sometimes it just doesn't work. And that's because I can't gesture properly, as it were. So those are the cut, copy, and paste gestures that are available, as I said, not just on iPad, but you can also do those on iPhone as well.
Yeah, they're really useful. And I have to say, Mikah, just like you, I struggle with both remembering them and also doing them. I always want to use 3 fingers and my thumb to sort of pinch and so on, and that doesn't work. But what I do instead, and this might be a good tip for people who are struggling to remember like the pinching and the spreading of the fingers and doing it with 3, because that's the tricky bit, is I just instead Girl Scout promise, but spread out. Like, so I take 3 fingers. You don't have to, wrap your thumb over your little finger. That's not required. I just do that. But make sure they're spread out. This is another problem. If you've got all your 3 fingers together, then it kind of looks to your device like you're just sort of resting your finger flat on the screen, and that's not going to trigger something. But if you've got 3 fingers with just a gap in between them, I just tap and I use the menu that pops up. It works really well. I've had no problems with that, and I found that that's a much easier experience for me, and I still get the benefit of those really easy to grab cut, copy, and paste gestures.
Yes, and point of clarification, thank you, Rosemary. That feature is universal clipboard. Continuity is the blanket term for all of the different ways that the devices kind of interact with one another, but it's universal clipboard that is that specific feature. iOS 16, of course, this is the next version of iOS. It'll be paired with iPadOS 16, macOS Ventura, and of course the various operating systems for the watch, for HomePod, for the Apple TV, etc. Tell us about what folks can expect in iOS 16 and kind of what you are most excited about. I'm ready to hear your list of things. So kick it off.
Sure. Well, iOS 16 looks like it's going to be a really good year for accessibility. Apple made a bunch of announcements about what was coming even before WWDC. So we in the accessibility community sort of had a little bonus extra time to get ready, and that was fun. One of the most interesting features is one called door detection. And this is available on LiDAR-capable phones and iPads, and it allows a person who's blind or visually impaired to basically use the phone's camera and the LiDAR sensor to determine whether a door is present, where it is, whether it's open, whether there are signage. And that's more useful than you might think, because like, let's say you're an independent traveler, you're blind or visually impaired, you get out of an Uber and you're at a shopping center or a restaurant or a home or whatever. That's great. The Uber drivers let you off. You say, I'm fine, good, thank you so much. But you got to find that door, and you've got to figure out what the state of that door is, whether it's open or closed, whether there's a sign that indicates that it's the right door. So door detection is this LiDAR enabled feature that's going to make that possible. And that's a follow-on to a feature we got last year called people detection, which was great in the social distancing world because it identified whether there was a person nearby and how far away that person was. So you could do a little bit of social distancing ad hoc. And both these features, again, require LiDAR, and they are made available in the Magnifier app, which is an app that a person who's blind wouldn't necessarily open because it's for somebody who's low vision, who wants to zoom in and make what they're looking at bigger. But that's where they've put it. And again, because it uses the camera. So for folks who have LiDAR equipped phones, a lot of people are really looking forward to door detection. It's even more practical than people detection. So that's kind of the number one and kind of the coolest one from a technical innovation point of view, because something people don't realize in terms of accessibility is that a lot of times accessibility features can be innovation leaders or road signs. They can indicate what's coming. A lot of people have suggested that, including me, I've suggested that door detection and people detection, because they use LiDAR, are indicators of what might be coming later when Apple does either AR-equipped devices, headsets, or perhaps glasses down the road, because these features have technological underpinnings that have much wider implications than just the accessibility part.
Yeah, that's something that I have noticed in the past is sometimes the features that may start in the innovations that you talk about in accessibility end up bleeding into the rest of the system and end up getting to become more than they were before. And, there's a lot of innovation taking place there, as you said. And I think that points to certainly a good amount of resources being given to make sure that these things work as they do. And for me, it's resulted in me feeling comfortable when I've had questions from folks who have low or no vision or other accessibility needs to be able to say, I suggest that you check out the iPhone or the iPad, depending on what they're asking for, because I know that VoiceOver in particular and that some of the other features there are well worth checking out and are helpful in those situations. And, you can kind of count on those a little bit more than maybe some of the third-party offerings that you can add on to the system. So outside of those LiDAR-based features, what else are you looking forward to in iOS 16?
So there's another really interesting one called Apple Watch mirroring. And basically, it will put the screen of an Apple Watch on your phone. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, if you have a physical disability, either because you can't manipulate gestures on your Apple Watch or because you can't get your hand around to do it, you've got some sort of motor delay. For some people, it's easier to do that on a phone screen. But beyond that, because the phone screen, the phone itself has features like assistive touch and switch control and other features that make it possible for a person with a physical disability to use alternate gestures to manipulate the phone and often not to have to do as many taps or as many swipes if they can't do that. Essentially, you've taken that Apple Watch interface and you've put it on the phone and you've made it possible to apply those phone features that don't exist on the watch to the watch interface. And I guess some people might say, well, why have an Apple Watch if it's a challenge for you to use? Well, the Apple Watch offers a lot, including wheelchair workouts and including all the fitness features, including access to apps in ways that people might be able to consume visually, even if they aren't able to manipulate them. So by putting the screen on the phone, which is super clever, I feel like it's going to open up the Apple Watch to a lot of people with physical disabilities who kind of wondered whether they'd be able to use it or not.
Absolutely. And I'm showing that feature on the screen right now. One of the other benefits here, whenever Rosemary and I are regularly talking about different features, it's very handy to have the Apple Watch right here on the screen and be able to show that off, where before we would have to have some sort of camera kind of above our heads and shine down on it. So again, this is one of those times where you say, you know, these features on their own are fantastic for what they provide, and it's one of those options where, like, instead of focusing on that thing that you mentioned, that a person goes, why then have an Apple Watch? Instead of saying that, is what I'm trying to say. Instead of saying, why have an Apple Watch if you can't use it? Let's celebrate the fact that this technology is here and can be used by so many people. And also, as you point out, with somebody who has a motor delay, think about them trying to get blood oxygen readings or pulse rate readings or any number of things that the Apple Watch can do by being on your wrist regularly. So the health accessibility of the Apple Watch, I think, is important. So I think this feature is great, and all the more reason for folks to get Apple Watches and be able to better monitor their health and keep track of that information. Very cool stuff. All right. So what's next? Yeah.
Well, another interesting feature, and this is not so much about innovation. This is about adding something to a feature that a lot of people already love, VoiceOver, which is the screen reader for an Apple iOS device. And it's also the name of the screen reader on macOS. It basically allows your interface of your device to be read aloud to you. And that's useful to people with blindness or visual impairment or even difficulty with reading. And VoiceOver is the foundational accessibility feature of iOS and macOS. It's probably the most well-known. But what they've done this year is they've added a bunch of voices. And that's interesting, and languages too. There are 20 new languages, which people are excited about. Ukrainian, Arabic, there are a number of great languages. What's cool about the voices, and this one sort of came out a little beyond the Apple Accessibility Awareness Day announcement, but there's a set of voices called Eloquence that's from a company named Code Factory. They are available on a variety of screen readers in the Windows environment, JAWS and NVDA, which are sort of big players in that world. And people on the Apple side have always wanted those voices to come to Apple, and Apple doesn't have a history of going out and getting voices from other places. Now, you've always been able with third-party apps to add some voices to those apps specifically, but with the Eloquence voices now being integrated into iOS, you can choose to use one of those many voices. And I always say one of those voices is named Shelly, so clearly it's a fine voice, and you should try it. But the advantage that I have my own. It's not the one I choose to use, which is kind of odd, but the advantage of Eloquence is it's optimized for reading at very high speed. If you're a screen reader user, and especially if you're reading a lot of content, if you're reading not just the interface, but documents, for work or for school or something like that, you tend to read at a much faster rate of speed, and you get used to that high rate of speed. And Eloquence may not, in fact, be the most eloquent sounding voice. It may not be, optimized for radio and for podcasts like you and I like to think we are, Mikah. But Eloquence is very, very fast. And there are people who can read up to 85% of the maximum speed on Eloquence. Where on Alex, they might read at 60 or 65%. No knock on Alex. Alex is still a great voice for VoiceOver. But Eloquence makes it possible for people to just be as efficient and productive as they possibly can. And it's also, to be really frank, it's quite familiar for people who've lived in those other environments, and they come to the Apple environment and they go, hey, where are the voices that I like? Well, Apple has said, here you go. Here's Eloquence.
Shout out again to Shelly Brisbin for stopping by the show for the accessibility episode. It was really fun talking to Shelly and learning a little bit about what new features Apple was bringing to the platform in terms of accessibility. And of course, it was a good time on iOS today to talk about the new features of the iPhone 14, but more importantly, answer the questions we had a lot of folks asking.
I have a precious here with me, Mikah, because this one's purple. But hi, I'm Rosemary Orchard. Yes, I re-dyed my hair to match my iPhone. That's what I do in life apparently now.
I love it, Rosemary. And I will tell you, I'm curious how you're feeling, because you do not have, do you have the the larger of the two? Do you have the Max or do you have the standard?
No, I just have the Pro. I find personally for me, the Max is a little too large and I struggle to hold it comfortably. And I do use things like the MagSafe pop socket, or this is the Pop Wallet Plus, which help me hold on to things because I'm quite clumsy. But even with that, I find the Max is just too big and it ends up not fitting in some of my bags, let alone non-existent pockets in my clothing. So I went Pro on my iPhone, which shows up, it almost looks black in some of the light, actually, which is ironic because my hair is showing up as super purple. But it's amazingly purple. I love this. I love it so much.
It's a really good purple. But the reason I was asking is because I saw that you got the iPhone 14 Pro clear case. And I actually got that case as well for my Pro Max. And I put it on and because I wanted to show off the deep purple. And it on the sides of it is, as you grab it, it's kind of creaky and sort of makes this, it has this unpleasant feeling as you're holding it and grasping it, where it's kind of like, it's almost as if it's just a very, 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 very tiny bit too big at the base of the case. And so there's this room on all of the sides where as you're grabbing it, it kind of presses in to the phone. And that causes the ridges that are kind of on the front to brush up against the sides of the phone. And so it doesn't feel secure. I didn't like how it felt, like it wasn't a good fit. So I ended up switching to, this is the forest green. So I did still get some green going. And it's got this, you can still see the purple here. So like this little purple and green kind of going. And I like it. I'm sad though, because I wanted to rock that deep purple while still maintaining a case. And so I'm curious, the reason why I wanted to ask you is because you've got the smaller of the two. Does that one have a better fit? Have you experienced any of that creakiness I was talking about?
I have not experienced any of the creakiness, but there is something that occurs to me that might be part of the cause of this. So if you look at the bottom of the case of the new iPhone cases, and I know this is specifically on the clear one, but I believe it is on the leather and the silicone as well, they don't like go all the way across with little cutouts in there for the speakers and the lightning port. It just ends. And I wonder if that contributes to it, but I've not had that. I feel that mine's quite secure. The corners are the edges are very rounded, so it almost feels a little slippery when I go to pick it up. But that's partly just me adjusting to picking up the new iPhone. And yesterday, when it slipped out of my hand, fortunately onto the sofa, it was because I was juggling between my iPhone 14 Pro, my dad's new 13 Pro, which was my 13 Pro until I got this one, and then my mum's new 12 Pro and her 11 Pro. So we've been doing the annual iPhone swap in the family, trading all the devices down. And my mum said that she wanted to take my dad's one, and my dad wanted mine. So they've gone off on holiday today with brand new setup iPhones for them, restored from backups, and they've got new cases on and everything, but we all had the same case, and it was very confusing if you just glanced at it from the front. When like the difference is, of course, always on display. That was my trick to figure out which one was which.
Yeah, that does get a little difficult. And people had asked too, will the 13 cases fit the new iPhone? If you've got the Pro or the Pro Max, the size of the squircle on the back of the phone, that rounded, well, I guess it's more of a rounded rectangle than really a squircle, but it is bigger than you had before, and also the lenses stick out a little bit more, and so you will find that these new cases account for that in a way that the ones previous to that didn't. And I have seen, I think that as we are going to get to talking about iOS 16, but we did want to talk about some of the stuff with the new iPhone, and I think one of the big things we can do here is talk about some of the early reactions, responses, questions, etc., that folks have gotten or that we may have seen. And I did notice that some folks had issues where they've got some sort of wireless charger. An example would be like this Nomad charger. and Nomad is a sponsor, not on the current episode, but they are a sponsor of the network, and I just want to note that. And because of how far out and now a little bit farther down the new iPhone camera comes, there is some issue in some cases. I haven't tried it with this one, so I don't know if this is one example of that, but some issue with folks being able to charge their devices. So that's something to be mindful of. If you've got something like the Apple MagSafe charger, where it's essentially just the puck that you can thwack onto the back of the device, you shouldn't have an issue there. But something that's a little bit more purpose-built, you may run into some problems.
Well, the classic one of this, of course, is the MagSafe Duo, which we already discovered last year wasn't, or was a little bit of a tricky fit with the 13. It's even more of a tricky fit with the 14. I'm sad to report. I actually gave my MagSafe Duo to my mom. And of course, because she's now got the 12 Pro, that works perfectly for her. It worked with the 11 Pro as well, just as a Qi charger, but you have to position it right. Like the whole thing with the wireless chargers, where if you don't put it on there just right, then it never charges and you wake up with a pancake phone, which is not fun. But yeah, I did try this and it works. Like you can get it on there, but you do have to like position it right, because otherwise it's not going to suction on and magnetize into the right location. So yeah, double check. But the good news is, folks, is if you've got a 14 Pro case, it will fit on a 13 or 12 Pro, because the bigger camera bump is not so much of a problem when you go down, because of course you've just got some extra space around the sides. It's not going to be a perfect fit, but you know, if you accidentally got a 14 case instead of a 13 one, then it should still be all right.
Yeah. And in fact, over the weekend, my colleague, Leo Laporte, and I were on the radio show, and we're talking about our new iPhones. He got one as well. He got a gold one, and he was rocking his current wallet case that he has with the new phone, and it didn't quite fit. The LiDAR sensor was a little bit covered, and one of the lenses was a little bit sort of blocked on the edge, but because the new one's on the way, but he wanted to have a case for it in the meantime. And so that was how he was kind of doing things in the meantime. And it worked okay. But again, you are better off, I think, getting a case that is made to fit your iPhone in particular. Up next, we have new iPads. Yes, Apple announced some new iPads, and with it came some confusion about just how many iPads there were and which iPad was for whom, and which one I should buy, which one someone else should buy. Lots to ask, but also a lot to talk about when it comes to the iPads. This, of course, is the replacement for the iPad. And we've got the iPad mini, we've got the iPad, the iPad Air, and the iPad Pro. There are 4 different types of iPads. This is an iPad Air that comes in a beautiful green color, unlike the new iPad. And it's always been the case that the sort of standard iPad with no extra words added to it is the iPad for the masses. It is the sort of most cost-effective iPad, and you can get, and I mean, I think that is sort of, it bears out that the capacity options that you have for this new iPad are 64 and 256 gigabytes. It's rather small in comparison to what you can get with some of the other iPads. So this is really an option to have an iPad that is relatively small or relatively cost effective in comparison to the others. And I may have been zoning out while you were talking about it, because I'm making sure, as we were recording the show, Apple announced these products right before the show kicked off, and so we're still kind of learning about them ourselves. Did you mention the fact that the camera's in a new place on the front?
I did not mention that because that's something that I'd read, but I haven't yet confirmed where it is, because I'm excited. Like, the fact that the camera, so I have a 12.9-inch iPad Pro in my hands. I'm holding it in portrait mode, and the camera's in the center at the top. Except when you put it into a Magic Keyboard, you rotate it landscape, which means that the camera is now in the center of the side. So if you look at somebody in the middle of your screen, you're looking off to one side, and it's just a very weird experience when you're talking to anybody, FaceTime, Zoom, whatever. So I'm glad to hear that. It looks to me like they've now put it in the middle of the top of the iPad when it's in landscape mode. They're leaning into the fact that they sell keyboards.
Exactly. So yeah, when I have my iPad Pro, it's almost always, and ignore all these fingerprints, it's almost always that I have it in that mode. I have it in a keyboard or in a keyboard case of some sort. So the camera has been moved from the side up to the top middle. And I think that is a great idea for an iPad, because I can't remember the last time I've used the front-facing camera on an iPad to take a selfie or something like that. It's not something that I do very often. So it's okay that we put it there. So in the rare case where I'm using it in portrait mode, it's in a different spot, but I very rarely use my iPad in portrait mode. I think what makes it better is that you can use an iPad in landscape mode and get a lot more on the screen and do a lot more at one time. Now, this, of course, is an A14 Bionic iPad. So it is rocking that A14 chip, which, again, on its own, great improvement, will make for things like center stage possible, where you have the camera able to kind of look at an entire scene and then keep you and that specific subject in frame no matter how you move. That's something that's kind of becoming standard across all of Apple's iPad devices. And then also Wi-Fi 6, so an upgrade to the Wi-Fi that's built in so that it's a little bit faster, and USB-C for the connector so that you can do more. Now, it's important to note, this is strictly USB-C. It is not Thunderbolt. So you won't get those same transfer speeds that you will get with some of Apple's other iPads. But that USB-C connector is great. And again, if you are looking at, I think, a device for a child, a device for a family member who doesn't need, the biggest, bestest, brightest, or just someone who's kind of looking to replace their computer with something that's a little less troublesome in some cases. That is where I think this new standard iPad can be really nice, particularly if you're using all of Apple's services for online storage and backup. Then that 256 gigabyte model is not so much of a stretch, I think.
No. I was looking at my mom's iPad the other day, and she's got a 256 gigabyte iPad, and it's one of it's a just iPad model, that much I remember, and it's used it like 20 gigabytes, maybe. That's how much storage space has been used on it, which I think is
nice.
Quite impressive as far as these things go. She just doesn't have that much stuff. Pretty much everything she does is on the web, and so she just doesn't need all that much stuff. Now, it is worth noting that the Apple Pencil on this is the first generation Apple Pencil. It's not the new Apple Pencil, which sticks to the flat side of an iPad, like, say, the one on the iPad Mini, which to me feels like a little bit of a interesting choice, perhaps. This Apple Pencil in particular is notable because it just sticks to the side of an iPad and then it works. And that means that I can easily pop it between the iPad Pro and the iPad Mini. But the good news is there's a USB-C to Apple Pencil adapter out there for all of you folks who are going to get this, so that you can, charge your Apple Pencil with USB-C instead of sticking it out the side of a port that you don't have on your iPad. So that's probably a good thing. And I'm also just looking at this in a bit more detail. I'm realizing that the Magic Keyboard that they have for this is different. It's a different kind of Magic Keyboard. It's not, unlike the one for the iPad Air, compatible with the iPad Pro. It is a different kind of keyboard using those 3 pins on the bottom of the iPad rather than the 3 pins on the back of the iPad. If I pick up my iPad Pro here, if you ignore the Moft sticker, which I use for a stand, then there's 3 little dots over to one side. That's where it connects to that Magic Keyboard. This is not how the new iPad, just iPad, connects. It uses 3 pins on the bottom edge of the iPad, bottom landscape, horizontally, with the power button in the top left. So this is a little bit of an odd mishmash, Mikah, between like the iPad Air, the iPad Pro Mini, and just an iPad. It seems a bit odd. Maybe they just had lots of Apple Pencils in stock that they needed to get rid of. it does it.
That's probably what it was, for sure. Yeah, it is interesting seeing now Apple's new lineup and kind of where all of these fit. I think that's something that we often do as Apple watchers and consumer tech journalists, is sort of figure out where these different devices fit. And it's often a question that we get, which device is the one that I should be getting? Which one should I purchase? And which one would be best for me? And I think that in a way it is made simple by the fact that Apple kind of has the iPad, iPad Air, iPad Pro nomenclature in place, but it can get a little muddled and a little confusing there as different devices get updates at different times. So trying to figure out where this fits in the lineup whenever they are kind of trying to iterate on everything and add more of the modern features to the devices, then it can start to make other ones sort of slip out a little bit. But as far as that goes, I think anyone who's getting this most recent iPad and is coming from an older model iPad, or in some cases, older model iPad Airs, will be plenty happy with this device. Of course, this wasn't the only thing that Apple announced at the event, but I do want to quickly do some what is the word I'm looking for? The sort of details of when it will be available. So you can go ahead and pre-order the new iPad, and they will be available in stores beginning Wednesday, October 26th. So those will be available in just over a week, week plus a day. And I think the prices start at $449 and for the Wi-Fi only models, and $599 for the Wi-Fi plus cellular models. So those will be available to you. And then the Apple Pencil is $99 for the first gen Apple Pencil, and the Magic Keyboard Folio, which we were just talking about, available for $249, or the new Smart Folio, which is available for $79. So you can check all of that out. I should
take a moment to mention that if folks are looking to get an Apple Pencil to go with their shiny new iPad, check out the Apple Refurb store, because that's where I got the Apple Pencil for my dad's iPad Pro. I actually got him the newer one because he's got, my old 11-inch iPad Pro, so I got the one with the flat side, but you can get them from Apple and it's a bit cheaper. So it's definitely worth keeping an eye out for that. You usually get them for like $79 instead of $99 or similar. So if you're looking for an Apple Pencil, don't necessarily pay full price if you want to save a couple of bucks there. Just comes in a white box instead.
So let's start by talking about what you can do with your voice on the Apple TV. Of course, the Apple TV has a new remote. If you buy one of the new Apple TVs, you will get this new Siri remote with it. If you got an older Apple TV, you may have upgraded to the new remote from the previous design. I'm looking around. I think I've, dug a hole and buried the former Siri remote that I did have. And, could we also check to make sure that the live stream is going in the Discord? Someone's saying that it's not. But with this remote, you have Siri on the side of the remote. So you tap and hold on that button and you talk into the microphone there at the top. And then that way you can communicate with Siri. And that moves from a Siri button that used to be on the front, but still with the same idea that you can talk right into the microphone right there, as opposed to needing to shout across the room to get things to happen. And I will occasionally, if I'm watching something, do like a little, hey, can you turn down the lights? It gets a little ASMR. I need you to turn down the lights in the living room. I'm watching the show. And it works. It's great. But I got to tell you, I'm not a big Siri person in general. And so using it on the Apple TV, that's almost always the extent of my use. But as you pointed out, there are quite a few other things that you can do. So do you want to tell us about your tips and tricks for using Siri on Apple TV?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things you can do with Siri that I really like. So the first thing that you can do is while you're watching something, say you get distracted by your phone or let's be honest, it's probably going to be your phone. And like you totally missed something that happened in the last minute or 3 minutes. You can use Siri and go, hey, skip back a minute, 3 minutes, 30 seconds, 10 minutes, whatever. And it'll jump back in whatever you were watching. You can also use that to jump forward to if you've seen, this particular part of a show or a movie or whatever. But what's really nice is you can also use Siri to restart something. So say you've watched like the first half of an episode, weeks and weeks ago, and you clicked on it and resumed, and you're just like, I don't remember what happened in this. I need to start from the beginning. You can hold the Siri button down and be like, start this episode from the beginning, and it'll just jump right back to time code 0000 right at the very, very beginning, and it'll start playing again, which is really nice. I use that feature quite a bit. It's just kind of like a nice way to not have to like hit that pause button, that center button on the Siri remote and scroll back to the beginning. It just jumps right back there. The other thing you can use Siri for is pulling up specific movies and shows. So I use this a lot. So if I like want to watch a movie, I'll just say, hold down the Siri button and be like, show me Empire Strikes Back. Well, it'll pull up Empire Strikes Back, but it'll also pull up related movies to that as well. So it'll pull up, all the other Star Wars movies and stuff like that, which is really nice. And then you can select those and you can hit play if those are movies you own, or if they're on a streaming service, you can play them from right there. Really handy. The other thing you can do, besides asking for movies or shows, is you can ask for like directors or actors. So I can be like, hold down that button and be like, show me movies by Francis Ford Coppola, or movies that Harrison Ford was in. And that way it will bring up all those movies that either that person directed or starred in, or if they're an actor and director, both. Super, super convenient for like movie buffs and stuff that just like, hey, I want to go through like the whole Steven Spielberg collection and stuff like that. And then it'll pull up all the Steven Spielberg movies. Just kind of a nice feature.
Yeah, absolutely. That is one thing where I remember watching the demonstration of that feature and not really making a whole lot of use out of it, but going afterward, because I kind of forgot about it, but it was so cool to see. So I've got an Apple TV running here. So let's just shout out a name for an actor. An actor of any gender, and we'll see what happens.
Let's just do Harrison Ford, because that's okay. The one I said for some reason.
Show me Harrison Ford movies. So this is a great time to talk about the latest version of tvOS has the new Siri interface, where instead of kind of taking up the whole screen, it just pops up here on the right. So let me move my bubble out of the way so it's a little bit easier to see. Whoa! So we've got Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, Apocalypse Now, Sabrina, The Fugitive, American Graffiti. If I tap on any of these, then it'll pull up that film, and then it can tell me where I can watch it. So I can immediately tap play, or I can see, trailers, related content, where to watch it. So Tubi, TV, whatever that is, but also the ability to rent it on one of these or open in Paramount Plus. So very handy. And then there you can see some of the different folks in this film. And then what's another way to use Siri for media other than an actor? Do they have other methods?
Yeah, so you can pull up directors. You can, I believe you can even ask for genres. This isn't something I've done, but I mean, we could try it right now. You can just be like, hey, show me some comedy movies or something.
Show me some comedy films.
I said the phrase.
All right.
Oops.
You did. So I did. This is interesting, because I did say films. Not TV shows, but
that is very, very interesting. And they're really throwing up the Apple TV Plus shows in there too. Very, very interesting. One thing I noticed with the new compact Siri design, when we said the Harrison Ford trigger, it only pulled up like 4 movies, and he's been in quite a bit more than that.
A lot. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so the old one used to pull up a lot more results. So, but this one's showing a ton of results. So this is kind of an interesting test case here. Wow, we had to scroll really far down.
Thanksgiving content. Oh, contents. Oh, I'm not finding anything for that. Surely there's a Thanksgiving movie out there somewhere.
I mean, planes, trains, and automobiles.
There you go. Exactly. Huh. I don't know. But yeah, there's a little bit of information about using Siri. And I do, this was one of the most interesting things about the Apple TV for me is my partner's pretty not super techie. I mean, knows enough, but is not, certainly not my level of techie. And so anytime I see some interaction that he does that I don't do, I'm always caught off guard. And he likes to use Siri to like turn on the Apple TV, to skip forward or skip, to rewind, to bring up a show. Has no problem doing that. And so I'm always just amazed, like, wow, you actually do that. It's pretty cool. But we have on occasion just shouted out because we've got a HomePod in the living room. Rewind 20 seconds, rewind 15 seconds, rewind 10 seconds. That I do like.
Yeah, that's a really nice feature. Like the HomePod integration, I think, was added last year. And one of my favorite things to do. So like if I come in the door after getting takeout or something like that, I'll say the Siri trigger phrase. I learned my lesson. I'm not going to say it again. And be like, turn on the Apple TV. And it'll turn, and because I have what's called CEC, which integrates via HDMI with your TV, it'll power on my TV, power on the Apple TV, and I'll have it all ready to go. So by the time, I grab silverware, put stuff on plates, I have the TV on and ready to go while I'm eating dinner or whatever.
Shout out again to Christopher Lawley for joining us for that episode to talk to me about the Apple TV. Still got to say, it was amazing hopping in the show notes, seeing everything that Christopher had added and going, okay, I think my job is done. We will definitely have Christopher Lawley back in the coming year. And of course, a special moment in my heart to get to help Steve Martin with his Shortcuts Corner request. I mean, I was amazed in the first place that Steve Martin makes use of shortcuts. Frankly, anyone who doesn't talk about iOS every single day, I'm always very impressed and excited when someone's talking about the shortcuts they use. And Rosemary had some great ideas to help out Steve Martin. So I was pretty pumped about that. This is the part of the show where you write in with your Shortcuts Corner requests, and Rosemary Orchard, the shortcuts expert, provides a response. This first one is very exciting. Actually, it's been 2 weekends now. A couple of weekends ago, Steve Martin, yes, the Steve Martin, actor and comedian and art collector, called into the Tech Guy radio show and asked some tech questions. Turns out Steve's pretty geeky. He knows a thing or three about tech. And so these were, kind of complicated questions, all a lot of fun to try and tackle. And one of the questions that he had related to some shortcuts that he used, which when he said, Mikah, I made some shortcuts. And I said, wait, what? You make that's amazing. So yeah, Steve Martin is a shortcuts guy. Anyway, he created a shortcut that is, I think, a pretty clever one for basically making it simpler to send an email. Right now on my phone, if I wanted to send an email, I would launch my email application. I would tap the new email. I would type in the person's contact details. I would type in the subject, and then I would type the message that I wanted to send in the email. That's complicated. That involves a lot of steps. And so Steve Martin said, I regularly email these people. I want a button that I can press to send them an email. So what Steve did was he created a shortcut that let him tap on it, and up popped the compose sheet, which is standard if you're using the kind of built-in email writing method. And then he would type in a message. His problem was that if he was typing a message that said, Sylvia just called and would like to have lunch at 2 p.m. and then he goes, wait, what's the restaurant? I don't remember. So he pops out to go look up what the restaurant is and then comes back, but he can't come back because it's a modal dialogue that just goes away. So Steve was asking for a way to have that shortcut, but keep the mail, the writing that he had done kind of there so that he could come back to it. So Leo said, hey, Mikah Sargent hosts a show called iOS Today with a shortcuts expert, Rosemary Orchard. I bet they would be able to help you out with this. And I said, yes, I do bet that Rosemary would be able to help you out with this. And so we got the shortcuts from Steve Martin. I passed them along to Rosemary. I talked about what Steve was looking for. And of course, Rosemary solved it in a few ways, but I'd love for you to tell everybody kind of what your process has been.
Yeah, so I'll start by showing folks the actual shortcut that Steve had, or more or less the shortcut, obviously, for logical reasons. When you share a shortcut, even if you've selected a contact here, so I've actually selected the Mikah Sargent contact, that doesn't actually get sent out with my shortcut. So, I didn't actually have the ability to email Steve's wife, which is probably a good thing because I don't really want to email strangers. But I've set up this shortcut to be very similar. So it's sending an empty message. It's not actually sending anything. It's got Mikah selected. I've got a subject that I've typed in as "Hi Mikah," and it's got "Show Compose Sheet on." So what would happen is Steve would run the shortcut and it would pop up with something like this, and he'd type probably something actually sensible rather than nonsense like I've just done. And then he'd swipe, but you notice I had to swipe up twice there. Once got rid of the email, and then the next time opened, the home screen. Now the good news is actually if I open Mail, and then if I tap and hold, this is on the iPad, if I tap and hold on the pencil, it should give me the option of actually showing me the draft. It's not doing that right now, but it does at the very least on the iPad, on the iPhone, when you open an app there. When you open Mail, it pops up sort of in the bottom with that. So you can get to the draft. And I mean, that's okay. But there are a couple of different ways of fixing this. So I had one approach where when he ran it, it would work pretty much the same way, except it would start with a menu and say, okay, do you want to start a new one, or do you want to resume writing? And if you said resume, it would just open Mail. And so you could find the draft, and you can even open, say, the drafts folder. But then I thought, why not just open Mail straight away with that? Instead of, monkeying around. So I've got two different approaches for this. And what you can do is just, have an email input. And then, so I will just, where has my keyboard is not showing in the correct way. So I'm just going to see if I can get that to actually pop up. It's being a little silly. Show keyboard. It's not giving me an ask for each time, but you could actually have it say, pop up and select contact, and then you can just use this great thing called a URL scheme. And people are going, wait, URL schemes? Or some people are going, wait, URL schemes? Those old things? So URLs are, HTTP, probably with an S, / www.twit.tv, for example, or twit.tv/iOS. But ignoring the HTTP, possibly with an S side of it, a URL scheme doesn't necessarily mean internet or web. It can actually mean, hey, thing, go do this. So instead of www. In fact, the HTTP, you can actually have, for example, mail to. If you have mail to : then that's going to be an email link. And this works everywhere. Okay, this works on Windows, this works on Linux, this works on Mac, this works on iPhone and iPad. And if you just have this typed somewhere, so if I had mail to iOS at twit.tv, or iOS today at twit.tv, and I put that somewhere and you clicked on that, no matter what device you were on, if you had an email application or something configured for email, it should pop open and start a new email. And you can actually go a little bit further with that. And you can actually even add subjects and bodies. So what I did, because I thought that this would be the best idea, is actually I built a way to create a mail to link on your iPhone. So there are websites out there that can do this, but I thought it would be a fun shortcuts exercise. So what happens is it pops up, it asks you to choose a contact. Okay, it then gets the email addresses from that contact. If you have more than one email address for that contact, going to ask you which email address you want to email. Okay, so if I have two email addresses for Mikah, it'll ask me which one it is that it wants me to pick. Okay, and then it'll ask for the subject. Okay, and then it offers me the option of putting a template email body in. Okay, so if I just pop open mail to illustrate this, we've got the to field, We've got the subject field and we've got the body field, okay, which is, the bit above sent from my iPad if you're watching the video. So each of these can be filled out, including CC and BCC. And so what I've done is I've built this and I've put it together and I've just copied it, because then what you can do is actually, you can then just end up pasting this URL that you've built into a shortcut. For example, here would be a text, and then you can just use the open URL action. And I feel like I ought to mention for folks that there is actually an action called open callback URL. This one, scripting your action, open X callback URL. In this case, even though we're technically using a URL scheme, we don't want to do that, because what a callback URL does, emphasis on the back, it brings you back to where you started from. Okay. And so if you just use open URL, which would be the text. So if I had iOS today at twit.tv here, then when I run this, then voila, it's just open mail for me. So I'm now straight in mail. And this is a great solution for a lot of people, because it now means that you can do whatever it is you need. And when you stop and you go to another app to find some information, I'm looking in the settings app to see whether or not there's an update I need to install. And then I can go back and type, yes, I need to install an update.
Still there.
So yeah, and I think that this is probably the easiest solution for a lot of folks. Sometimes you can go super nerdy and super cool and do things with all the fancy new technologies. And sometimes it's the tried and tested ones that do the trick.
So in what case would you want to use the callback URL?
So, for example, if like me, you use an app called Agenda for note-taking. Agenda has great URL scheme support, and you can use that to, for example, create a note and get the ID of it. And when you get the ID, you're going to want to go back so that you can use that ID in something else. So you can, run a series of commands. And this is how everything on iPhone automation-wise for many folks was done before shortcuts came along. If anybody remembers Launch Center Pro and apps like that, they all worked based on with URL schemes. So it's a case of like, hey, go here and do the thing, and then bring you back as soon as you're done. And nowadays we can use shortcuts for most of this, so it happens in the background. But in this case, we just want to open mail. So why not just open mail?
Yeah, that's perfect. That is, and I love that it ended up being such a simple solution. We are going to forward that along to Steve Martin, and he'll be well on his way to emailing. And with that, we have reached the end of this very special holiday episode of iOS Today. Thanks so much to Rosemary Orchard. Thanks so much to Matthew Cassinelli, to Dan Morin, to Christopher Lawley, to all the guests who have been on the show, Shelly Brisbin. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. And of course, thank you, all of you out there, for watching the show, for sending in your feedback, all of that stuff. It is what makes this so much fun. I so enjoy doing this show because of all of you. So I hope that the rest of your holiday season is amazing, and Rosemary Orchard and I are looking forward to seeing you in the new year. Until then, it's time to say goodbye. Hey there, I'm Mikah Sargent from Twit, and you may be asking a question. What in the world do you do if you want to thank that hard-working team of yours? Well, why not gift them a Club Twit corporate subscription? Oh, and here's a secret. You'll be benefiting yourself too, because you will be able to keep your team informed and entertained with podcasts covering the latest in tech, so they'll always stay up to date. With a Club Twit subscription, they're going to get access to all of our podcasts ad-free. They'll get access to the members-only Discord server where they can chat with fellow Club Twit members and all of us here at Twit, and exclusive shows like Hands on Mac, Hands on Windows, and the Untitled Linux Show. Go to twit.tv/clubtwit and look for corporate plans for complete details.